scariest stories are not the ones about ghosts or monsters, but the ones that happen on an ordinary night when you think you're completely safe inside your own home. This story was sent to me by one of my followers, and he swears it happened to him just last week. It was 1 a.m. I was sitting alone in the living room, working on a late university project. The house was completely silent, except for the soft sound of rain tapping against the glass of the back window that overlooks the garden. Suddenly, I heard a sound. Not thunder or rain. It was a faint scratching on the glass. At first, I told myself it was just tree branches moved by the wind. But then I remembered something that made my heart stop for a moment. My father had trimmed those trees completely 2 days ago. There were no branches reaching the window. I ignored it and tried to focus on my laptop screen, but a strange, cold feeling swept through the room. I felt a presence staring straight into my back. Slowly, I lifted my head and looked at the reflection of the window in the large mirror in the living room. In the lower corner of the window, I saw something I couldn't understand at first. There were 4 human fingers, extremely pale, gripping the edge of the frame. There was no face, just those fingers, slowly moving, as if their owner was trying to pull himself up to look inside the room. I froze in place. I knew that if I turned around, I would see him face to face. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. A heavy silence filled the room, seconds that felt like hours. Then, I heard the strangest sound you could imagine at that moment, a muffled laugh coming from behind the front door of the house, not the window. He was distracting me with the window while he had already found a way inside. I ran to my room, locked the door, and called the police. When they arrived, they found no one, but they did find one thing in the garden: a long knife placed on the window ledge and muddy footprints leading directly to the basement door that I had forgotten to lock. Imagination. But what if that feeling is the only warning you'll ever get before it's too late? This story happened to a girl named Sarah, and since that night, she has never gone out alone at night again. Sarah worked at a small grocery store that stayed open until late. That night, heavy rain was pouring down, and the store was almost empty. A man entered, wearing a long yellow coat and a hat that completely hid his face. He didn't buy anything. He just stood at the end of the aisle, watching Sarah as she arranged the shelves. Sarah says she tried to smile at him and ask if he needed help, but he didn't respond. He stood there like a statue. After 10 minutes, the man left the store and disappeared into the darkness. Sarah let out a sigh of relief, thinking the strange encounter was over. Sarah's shift ended at 2 a.m. She walked to her car in the dark parking lot behind the store. As she drove home, she noticed an old black car following her, not too closely, but always staying about 2 cars behind. Wanting to be sure, Sarah turned into a side street that led nowhere. The black car followed. Panic set in. She sped up and drove straight home. She ran inside, locked the door, and watched from behind the curtain. The black car never appeared, and she thought she was finally safe. An hour later, as Sarah tried to fall asleep, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She opened it and screamed. The phone slipped from her hand. The message contained a photo of Sarah sitting in her living room just minutes earlier, taken from the kitchen window. But the real horror wasn't the photo. The real horror was the message that followed. "You left my yellow coat in the parking lot. May I come in to get it?" It turned out the man hadn't been following her car at all. He had been hiding in the back seat the entire time and only got out after she went inside. Always check the Going on a camping trip alone may seem like a good way to relax, but in dark forests, silence is the one thing you should fear the most. This story was sent to me by a young man named Mark, and what he discovered through his old radio will make you think twice before camping alone. Mark was on his second night in a forest far away from the city. He sat by the campfire, trying to catch any radio station on his small radio just to break the silence. There was nothing but static as midnight slowly approached. Suddenly, the static cut out and was replaced by the sound of heavy breathing, slow, steady breathing, as if someone had placed their mouth directly in front of the radio. Mark thought it was just signal interference, so he changed the station, but the sound followed him across every frequency. Uneasy, Mark turned the radio off completely. At that exact moment, he heard a real sound coming from behind the trees, the sharp crack of a snapping branch. He froze, grabbed his flashlight, and shone it toward the noise. He saw nothing, only thick, endless darkness. Mark retreated into his tent and zipped it shut tightly. For reasons he couldn't explain, he felt an urge to turn the radio back on. When he did, there was no breathing this time. There was a voice whispering his name. "Mark, Mark, your flashlight battery is going to die soon." Panic took over. How could whoever was on the radio know about the flashlight? What made it worse was the fact that the radio wasn't plugged into anything, and the batteries had fallen out onto the ground just minutes earlier. Mark slowly looked up at the inside of the tent and saw a very tall shadow standing just outside. The figure was holding something in his hand, a walkie-talkie. In that moment, Mark realized the truth. The voice he heard on the radio wasn't a broadcast. It was that person transmitting directly on a nearby frequency, deliberately playing with his nerves. Mark tore out of the other side of the tent and ran straight to his car, never